The wrench slipped from Marcus Sullivan's oil-stained fingers and clattered against the concrete floor of Sullivan Brothers Auto Repair. His hands trembled not from cold but from exhaustion that lived in his bones. 34 years old, and he felt ancient. The hydraulic lift groaned above him, holding a rusted Toyota that belonged to Mrs. Chen from down the block. She couldn't afford the repair, but Marcus couldn't afford to turn her away. He wiped his hands on a rag and checked his phone. 3 missed calls from Rosie's school. His 5-year-old daughter was asking for Daddy David again. The grief counselor said it was normal, that kids her age struggled to understand permanence. But Marcus understood it perfectly. David Sullivan, his husband of 8 years, wasn't coming home. Ever. The drunk driver who took him 2 years ago had left Marcus with 4 children, 3 jobs, and a secret fear that gnawed at him every night. What if someone decided he wasn't fit to raise them? What if David's conservative parents found a way to take them? What if being a gay single father in South Boston wasn't enough? The shame burned deeper than the grief sometimes. He remembered his own coming out at 19, how his Irish Catholic parents had looked at him like he'd confessed to murder. His father's voice still echoed. No son of mine. His mother had simply turned away, rosary beads clicking like broken promises. He'd learned to make himself smaller, quieter, safer. But David had changed that. David, with his law degree and fierce protection of Marcus's heart, had made him believe love could be loud. Now alone again. Marcus felt himself shrinking back into old patterns. At work, when the other mechanics made jokes about his family situation, he said nothing. When strangers assumed he was divorced from a woman, he didn't correct them. When school forms asked for mother's name, he wrote deceased and left the rest blank. Survival meant invisibility. Just like before, David saved him from himself. The bell above the shop door chimed. Caleb, his 14-year-old son, stood in the doorway with an envelope. His sandy hair fell across eyes that held too much wisdom for his age. Dad, this came to the house. It's from some law firm in North Carolina. Morrison and Associates. They said it's about a relative. Marcus had no relatives. His parents had made that clear when they'd refused to attend his wedding. David's family barely acknowledged his existence. He took the envelope with greasy fingers, noting the expensive paper, the formal letterhead. Inside, a letter that would change everything. Dear Mr. Sullivan, we regret to inform you of the passing of Howard Mitchell, your great uncle, who has named you sole heir to his property, the Willowbrook Lodge, located in Asheville, North Carolina. Please contact us within 14 days to arrange transfer of ownership. Most unusually, Mr. Mitchell left specific instructions that you would understand why you were chosen, as someone who knows what it means to love in a world that tries to erase you. Marcus read it twice, then a third time. Howard Mitchell. He'd never heard the name, but something about the phrasing made his chest tight. David had mentioned North Carolina once, something about research he was doing before the accident. Marcus had been too lost in grief to pay attention. He looked at Caleb, who was watching him with the careful expression of a child who'd learned to read his father's moods like weather patterns. Can we check it out? That maybe it's something good for once. For the first time in months, Marcus felt something other than exhaustion. Not hope, not yet, but curiosity. And maybe that was enough to start with. Sometimes the best inheritance isn't money or property. It's the courage to believe you deserve something better than survival. If this story moves you, subscribe to Heart Stories for more tales of family, courage, and love that refuses to hide. The drive to Asheville took 6 hours through mountains that seemed to breathe with ancient secrets. Marcus had packed the kids into their aging Honda Pilot, along with sleeping bags, snacks, and Sophie's carefully organized folder of questions about their mysterious great-uncle. His 11-year-old daughter approached mystery like a prosecutor, determined to solve every puzzle through logic and evidence. Mason, 8 and eternally optimistic, had declared this the best adventure ever, while Rosie clutched her stuffed elephant and asked if Daddy David would be waiting at the hotel. The question hit Marcus like a physical blow, but he answered gently, the way David would have. No, sweetheart. But maybe we'll find something that helps us remember him better. Willowbrook Lodge sat at the end of a winding gravel road, surrounded by pines that whispered stories of decades past. The building was larger than Marcus had expected, 3 stories of weathered wood and stone, with a wraparound porch that sagged under the weight of time. But there, faded and barely visible above the front entrance, hung a rainbow flag so old its colors had softened into pastels. Before he could process what that meant, an elderly black woman emerged from the shadows of the porch. She moved with purpose despite her age, silver hair braided with colorful threads, eyes sharp as cut glass. "Agnes Thompson," she said, extending a weathered hand. "Been waiting for you to show up. Marcus Sullivan. Your uncle told me you'd come eventually." Agnes led them through rooms that smelled of cedar and old stories. The lodge had been closed for years, but she'd maintained it like a shrine. In the main sitting room, photographs lined the mantel. Men and women from different decades, some formal, some candid, all sharing something Marcus couldn't quite identify until Agnes spoke again. "This place was a sanctuary," she explained, settling into a chair that creaked with familiarity. "Back in the 70s and 80s, when being like us could get you killed, Howard opened these doors to anyone who needed shelter. Runaway kids, folks fleeing violent families, couples who couldn't be together anywhere else. He saved more lives than any hero you'll read about in books. Caleb, always direct, asked the question Marcus couldn't form. Howard was gay." Agnes smiled, but her eyes held old pain. "Honey, your uncle spent his whole life protecting people like us while hiding who he was. Never had a partner. Never got to live his truth out loud. But he made sure others could, until they tried to stop him. The fire happened in 1974. Agnes's voice grew quiet, respectful of old ghosts. "Wasn't an accident, no matter what the report said. Local business coalition decided they'd had enough of our kind of trouble. Burned half the lodge down, killed 3 people. Howard rebuilt, but he was never the same. Spent the rest of his life collecting evidence, documenting every crime, every cover-up, every name of those responsible." She led them to a room behind the kitchen, where a hidden panel revealed stairs leading down. Howard's archive, she called it. Everything he couldn't prove in court, but knew in his heart. "Your husband David," she said, looking directly at Marcus. "He came here 2 months before he died. Said he was investigating connections between old hate groups and new ones, following money trails that led back to those same families." Marcus felt the world tilt. David had never mentioned Howard or Asheville or any investigation. But then, David had been secretive in those final weeks, staying late at the office, making quiet phone calls, looking worried in a way that seemed beyond normal legal work. In the basement archive, boxes lined shelves like a library of pain, financial records, newspaper clippings, photographs of burned buildings and beaten faces, names written in Howard's careful handwriting. And there, in a folder marked "Recent Investigations," Marcus found David's business card clipped to a stack of bank records. Looking at his sleeping children that night, Marcus knew what David would choose, what Howard had chosen, what Marcus himself had to choose if he wanted his kids to inherit a world where love didn't have to whisper in the dark. Sometimes courage isn't about being fearless. It's about being afraid and choosing justice anyway. Dr. Ryan Chen arrived at Willowbrook Lodge 3 days later. Not as a stranger, but as someone Marcus had been avoiding calling for weeks. The child psychologist had been working with Mason and Rosie since David's death, helping them process grief that no 5-year-old or 8-year-old should have to carry. But Marcus had been too proud, too afraid of appearing incapable, to accept help for himself. Ryan's presence filled the lodge with calm competence. He was Marcus's age, second-generation Korean American, with gentle hands and eyes that had seen enough family trauma to recognize it in others. When he knelt to Rosie's level and asked about her elephant's feelings, Marcus felt something crack open in his chest. This was what safety looked like, what David would have wanted for their children. Agnes showed Ryan the archive while Marcus explored the safe Howard had mentioned. Inside, he found something that stopped his heart. David's handwriting. Notes scattered across legal pads, mapping connections between past and present hate crimes. Bank records linking 1970s arson to modern conversion therapy facilities. Names Marcus recognized from Boston politics, from corporate boards, from the very mechanics who made jokes about his family. The pattern was elegant in its cruelty. The same families who had funded violence against LGBTQ+ people in Howard's time had simply evolved their methods. Legal challenges to adoption rights, funding for discriminatory legislation, financial pressure being on businesses that supported equality. David had been building a case that would have exposed decades of systematic persecution. Caleb found the keystone document, a bank transfer from the night David died, payment to a private investigation firm known for intimidation tactics. The timing wasn't coincidence. Someone had ordered David's silence, and when threats hadn't worked, they'd arranged his accident. Sophie, with her methodical mind, had created a timeline that painted the full picture. Every major setback for LGBTQ+ rights in the region could be traced back to funding from the same network. Every mysterious fire at a gay-friendly business, every unexplained legal challenge, every family torn apart by custody battles, all connected by money flowing from the same poisoned well. Ryan helped the children process what they'd learned without losing their sense of safety. He sat with Mason while the boy asked why some people hated love, helped Rosie understand that Daddy David had been trying to protect families like theirs. But it was his conversation with Marcus that changed everything. "You're not responsible for David's death," Ryan said quietly as they walked the lodge grounds at sunset. "And you're not responsible for fixing everything he left undone, but you are responsible for choosing what kind of man you want to be going forward." Marcus had spent 2 years believing he was weak for not being able to save David, weak for struggling to raise 4 children alone by Marwan, weak for hiding parts of himself to make others comfortable. But looking at what Howard had accomplished from the shadows, what David had risked in the light, Marcus realized strength came in many forms. That evening, Agnes revealed the final piece of the puzzle. Howard had been documenting the network for 40 years, but he'd never had the legal expertise to build a prosecutable case. David had promised to provide that expertise, to turn decades of evidence into justice. His death hadn't ended the investigation. It had passed the responsibility to someone new. Jackson Reed arrived the next morning like storm clouds gathering on the horizon. He wore an expensive suit and a smile that never reached his eyes. Representing what he called interested parties in resolving the property situation quietly, his offer was generous. He claimed, "Enough money to secure the children's futures, send them to good colleges, give Marcus the comfortable life he deserved." But Marcus had learned to read the language of threats disguised as kindness. Reed's questions about the children's custody situation, about Marcus's fitness as a single parent, about how tragic it would be if social services had to get involved. Those weren't casual observations. They were weapons pointed at everything Marcus loved most. Sophie, listening from the stairs, understood before the adults did. This was the same man from Daddy David's files. She slipped away to call Maria Santos, the investigative journalist whose business card she'd found in David's papers. A woman who specialized in exposing corruption, who'd been waiting 2 years for someone to come forward with evidence about David's death. "I think you should leave now," Marcus said quietly, his voice steady for the first time in years. "You're welcome to try. But you should know that everything my husband died to protect is about to become everyone else's problem too. Sometimes the most radical thing you can do is refuse to disappear quietly." Maria Santos arrived at Willowbrook Lodge like justice, wearing sensible shoes and carrying a recorder that had toppled governments. The investigative journalist had spent 2 years following cold leads about David's death, hitting walls built by money and silence, now sitting across from Marcus in Howard's archive. She held evidence that would reshape everything. The network's modern face was sophisticated. Maria explained, Jackson Reed represented interests that traced back to the original arsonists, But they had evolved beyond crude violence. Now they use legal systems, financial pressure, political influence. They funded conversion therapy centers, bankrolled discriminatory legislation, quietly pressured employers to fire LGBTQ+ workers. Agnes brought in Reverend Samuel Hayes, a black minister whose church had become sanctuary for families like Marcus's. Samuel had lost his own son to suicide after years of religious trauma, and he'd spent the decades since building bridges where others built walls. His congregation included LGBTQ+ families from across Asheville, creating the kind of chosen family Marcus had forgotten existed. The local network surprised Marcus. Dr. Elena Vasquez, who ran the Youth Crisis Center, Tom and James Williams, married farmers who'd fostered 12 LGBTQ+ teenagers over 15 years, Sarah Kim, the lawyer who specialized in custody cases involving non-traditional families. None of them had waited for permission to create change. They'd simply begun. Ryan helped coordinate the children's involvement. Caleb, with his tech skills, had already begun digitizing Howard's archives, creating searchable databases that revealed patterns spanning decades. Sophie organized evidence with the precision of a prosecutor, while Mason drew maps connecting bad people to bad actions in ways that made complex corruption comprehensible. The plan was elegant in its simplicity. Maria would publish David's investigation, expanded with Howard's evidence, and expert legal analysis from Sarah Kim. Samuel's church network would provide protection and support. The local LGBTQ+ community would demonstrate that the lodge represented something worth preserving. But Reed's people moved faster than expected. Social services appeared at the lodge with questions about Marcus's fitness as a guardian, anonymous reports about unsafe living conditions, inappropriate influences, children being exposed to dangerous situations. The bureaucratic language was sterile, but the threat was ancient. Take away his children, destroy his family, force him back into silence. Agnes stood on the lodge's front steps like a general defending her territory. These children, she declared to the social worker, are safer here in 1 week than they've been anywhere else in 2 years. You want to talk about inappropriate influences? Talk about a system that tries to punish love and protect hatred. The community response was swift and overwhelming. Samuel's congregation arrived first, then families from the youth center, then couples and individuals who understood that an attack on one LGBTQ+ family was an attack on all of them. They formed a protective circle around the lodge, not with anger but with presence. Ryan provided expert testimony about the children's emotional health, documenting how they'd thrived since coming to Asheville, how the sense of belonging and purpose had healed trauma that traditional therapy had barely touched. Sophie presented her organized evidence to the social worker, explaining with 11-year-old clarity how learning their family's history had made them stronger, not more vulnerable. The breakthrough came when Maria's investigation went live. The story exploded across national media, connecting David's murder to decades of systematic persecution, revealing how the same money that funded political campaigns also funded violence against LGBTQ+ Americans. Reed's network, exposed in daylight, began crumbling as politicians distanced themselves and corporate sponsors withdrew support. But the most powerful moment came when Marcus stood before the gathered crowd and spoke his truth without apology or qualification. For years, he said, his voice carrying across the lodge grounds, I've been afraid that loving David, that raising our children as openly LGBTQ+ family would make us targets. Today I learned we were already targets. The only choice was whether to face that truth with courage or let fear make us smaller. We're not hiding anymore, Marcus said, looking directly at Reed. We're not apologizing for existing, not making ourselves smaller to make you comfortable, not teaching our children that love is something to whisper about in the dark. Real strength isn't about winning fights. It's about choosing which fights are worth having. 6 months later, Willowbrook Lodge hummed with life in ways Howard could never have imagined. The main building had been restored to its original beauty, but now it served as both museum and active community center. School groups toured the archive learning about LGBTQ+ history, while support groups met in the evenings, and young people found internships learning to preserve stories that had almost been lost. Marcus stood in what had once been Howard's hidden basement, now transformed into the David Sullivan Legal Justice Center. Sarah Kim ran legal clinics twice weekly, helping LGBTQ+ families navigate custody battles, discrimination cases, and adoption processes. The irony wasn't lost on Marcus that David's death had led to exactly the kind of legal advocacy center he dreamed of creating. Agnes had become the lodge's official historian, her storytelling bringing the past alive for visitors who couldn't imagine a time when loving someone could get you killed. She worked closely with high school students documenting oral histories, ensuring voices like Howard's wouldn't disappear with their generation. The children had grown into their roles as the lodge's heart. Caleb, now 15, managed the digital archive that had become a national resource for researchers studying LGBTQ+ persecution. Sophie ran educational tours with the confidence of someone who'd learned her family's history was worth preserving and sharing. Mason created art projects with visiting children, teaching them that families came in many beautiful forms. Rosie, now 6, simply loved everyone who walked through the doors, her acceptance a daily lesson in how natural equality could be. Ryan had officially joined their family 3 months earlier, not through marriage but through a commitment ceremony held in the lodge's main hall. The children had planned everything, from Caleb's speech about chosen family to Sophie's carefully organized timeline of how Ryan had become essential to their happiness. Mason had drawn portraits of their new expanded family, while Rosie had insisted on wearing her best dress to welcome Daddy Ryan officially. The relationship had grown slowly, built on shared values rather than desperate need for completion. Ryan understood Marcus's grief for David wasn't something to be replaced, but something to be honored alongside new love. He brought stability without trying to erase the past, strength without demanding to be the center of attention. Maria's investigation had triggered federal prosecutions that were still ongoing. Jackson Reed faced charges for conspiracy and witness intimidation. Several politicians had resigned rather than face questions about their funding sources. Most importantly, the network's financial pipeline to anti-LGBTQ+ organizations had been severed, defunding dozens of conversion therapy programs and discriminatory legal challenges. But Marcus measured success differently now. In the letters that arrived weekly from young people who'd found hope in the lodge's story, in the families who visited to see proof that LGBTQ+ parents could raise happy, confident children, in the way Caleb now spoke proudly about having 2 fathers, how Sophie defended family equality in school debates, how Mason drew pictures where every family looked different, but every child looked loved. The most profound change was in Marcus himself. He'd stopped apologizing for existing, stopped making himself smaller to fit other people's comfort zones. When introducing himself, he led with pride rather than apology. Marcus Sullivan, father of 4, widower, partner to Ryan, keeper of stories that needed telling, standing where Howard's sanctuary had once hidden LGBTQ+ people from hatred, now openly celebrating the families they'd built despite that hatred. Marcus felt the presence of everyone who'd fought for this moment. Howard, who'd protected others while sacrificing his own happiness. David, who'd died trying to expose the truth. Agnes, who'd kept faith through decades of silence. Ryan took his hand as the sun set over the Blue Ridge Mountains. Their children played with dozens of others whose families reflected every possible configuration of love and commitment. In the distance, the restored rainbow flag flew proudly, no longer faded but brilliant in its declaration that this was a place where love could be loud. The most powerful revolutions aren't fought with weapons. They're fought with stories, with families who refuse to hide, with communities that choose love over fear. Sometimes changing the world begins with one person deciding they deserve to exist openly and the courage to teach their children the same lesson. Have you ever had to choose between safety and authenticity? How did you find the strength to live your truth? Share your story and subscribe to Heart Stories for more real tales of courage, family, and the power of refusing to let love whisper in the dark.